The March breeze in Boston hinted that spring was on its way. Martha Wilson stared out from her office window and inhaled deeply. As the founder of Wilson Design, her architectural firm had built a strong name over 10 years. Yet today her mind wasn't on work. It was focused on an upcoming family gathering. "Martha, Thomas is on the line," Claire, her assistant, announced cheerfully as she stepped inside. Martha smiled in return and picked up the phone. "Are you ready for dinner tonight?" Thomas Clark's calm voice came through. "I am," Martha said, though a flicker of nervousness crept into her tone. "After all, tonight's when we tell my parents and sister about our engagement." She glanced down at the emerald ring sparkling on her finger. Though she was among Boston's top architects, facing her family tonight stirred a nervous unease. The Wilson family home, a grand New England-style house, sat quietly on a Beacon Hill street. Edward, her father, was a heavyweight in real estate, while her mother Linda served on the Boston Symphony Orchestra board. Though respected publicly, at home their demeanor was quite different. Martha hesitated at the door and squeezed Thomas's hand. "You okay?" Thomas asked softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm just worried about Ashley," Martha admitted. Ashley Wilson had always been the favored child, thriving in the spotlight at every family event. While Martha's parents praised Ashley's charm and beauty, Martha's own accomplishments were often overlooked. The door opened to reveal Linda Wilson, impeccably made up. "Martha, Thomas, welcome," Linda said with a smooth voice. "Everyone's gathered." In the living room, Edward stood by the fireplace with a drink in hand. Ashley lounged on the sofa, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression. "Hello, Martha," Edward said briefly before turning to Thomas. "Thomas, how's the design for our company's new office coming?" Martha felt a sharp pang of discomfort. Her father always ignored her successes but showed interest in her partner's work. Ironically, Martha herself had designed the new Wilson Development Building, yet Edward spoke as if Thomas had done it. "Actually, Martha was the architect," Thomas said politely. "I just offered some suggestions." Edward blinked, then quickly recovered. "Ah yes. Well, talent runs in the family, I suppose." Ashley finally looked up and gave them a dismissive glance. "So, what's this big announcement?" Martha and Thomas exchanged a look before Martha stepped forward. "We're engaged." A hush fell over the room. Linda was the first to speak. "How wonderful," she said, though surprise was more evident than happiness. "When did this happen?" "Last month," Martha answered, holding out her hand. "Thomas proposed by the Charles River." Edward set his glass down and gave a curt congratulations. "Congratulations. Marriage is a good thing. So, what kind of wedding are you thinking of?" Before Martha could respond, Linda interrupted. "You're both adults now, so something simple and tasteful would be best." "Mom, I'm 35, Martha said softly. Ashley finally showed some interest, eyeing the ring. "An emerald," she sneered. "Not a diamond." "Emeralds suit Martha best," Thomas said firmly but kindly. "I picked it to match her eyes." During dinner, the conversation veered away from the engagement and towards Ashley's recent trip to Europe and her new boyfriend. Their parents hung on every word, barely acknowledging Martha and Thomas's announcement. "By the way," Edward said as dessert arrived, "I want to talk about Grandma's inheritance." Martha's body stiffened. Grandmother Josephine, who had passed 2 months earlier, was the only family member who had truly understood her. The joy of the engagement announcement faded quickly. Was this what tonight had really been about? Edward cleared his throat and continued. "Although the official reading of the will is next week, I think it's fair to tell you now. Your grandmother left the majority of her estate to Ashley. Martha, you'll receive only part of her jewelry collection." Martha sat frozen, stunned by what she'd just heard. Given how close she'd been to her grandmother, it didn't add up. "Could I see the will?" Thomas asked calmly. Edward's expression tightened. "I'd prefer to wait until the official reading at the firm. Everything will be clear then." On the drive home, Martha didn't say a word. Thomas reached for her hand. "This doesn't feel right," he said quietly. "I can't imagine your grandmother doing something like that." Martha nodded slowly. "Neither can I. But right now we need to focus on the wedding." In the days that followed, the wedding plans began, slowly and with little help from her parents. The support was lukewarm at best, and the budget modest. Then, to her surprise, Ashley offered, "I'll help with the wedding, sis." Martha looked up, startled. "Really?" Ashley smiled sweetly, though something in her eyes didn't match. "Of course. I want your big day to be perfect." Martha, unsure but hopeful, agreed to accept her help. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Martha sat in her apartment with her wedding planner, Julia, reviewing final details. With Thomas out of town, she was handling things solo. "Almost all the RSVPs are in," Julia said, scanning her tablet. "We just need to finalize the seating chart and do the cake tasting." Martha nodded. "Ashley's handling the cake. She introduced me to a pastry chef she knows." Julia arched an eyebrow. "Ashley's helping. That's unexpected." Martha chuckled. "I know. I'm surprised too. But maybe I should just take the help and be glad." Julia, who had known Martha for a decade, didn't look convinced. That weekend, Martha went to her parents' house alone. Thomas wouldn't be back until Monday. As she entered, voices carried from the living room. Ashley's voice, sharp and animated. "Yes, everything's set. It'll be the perfect surprise." Martha stopped cold. Ashley was on the phone. Quietly, she moved down the hall and stood outside Ashley's bedroom door. "She doesn't suspect a thing," Ashley was saying. "Seriously, Martha's so clueless. Mom and Dad are on board. We're all in on it." Martha's heart pounded. What were they planning? A surprise at a wedding was usually something touching. Speeches, gifts, maybe a dance. But Ashley's tone didn't feel celebratory. It felt calculated. Hearing footsteps, Martha quickly slipped into the kitchen. Moments later, Ashley strolled in. "Oh, hey, Martha. When did you get here?" she asked with an innocent smile. "Just walked in," Martha replied evenly. "Where are Mom and Dad?" "They're at the golf club. They'll be back tonight." Ashley leaned casually against the counter. "How are the plans coming along?" "Almost everything's in place," Martha said. "Thanks for arranging the cake. That pastry chef seemed lovely." "Of course," Ashley said lightly. "It's your big day. I want it to be perfect." Her words sounded sincere, but her eyes told a different story. Martha watched her carefully. "Are you planning something special for the wedding?" she asked, testing the waters. Ashley blinked, briefly thrown off. "Huh. What kind of special?" "Well, weddings often have surprises. Just curious if you were planning one." Ashley recovered quickly, smiling again. "Oh, that. Course I am. But if I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it?" Later that night, Martha called Thomas. "Something's off," she said quietly. "I think Ashley's up to something." "What do you mean?" Thomas asked, concerned. "I overheard her on the phone. She said, 'It'll be the perfect surprise for my sister's wedding.' And that I was clueless." "Is that all?" Thomas replied, sounding relieved. "Martha, maybe it's just something nice. You could be reading too much into it." Martha sighed. "Maybe you're right. It'll be okay," he said gently. "I'll be back soon. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." The next day, needing clarity, Martha drove out to visit Doris Hudson, her grandmother's closest friend. Doris lived in a quiet house just outside the city, surrounded by a neat little garden. "Martha, what a lovely surprise," Doris said, giving her a warm hug. "Come in, I just made tea." They settled into the living room, and Doris's expression turned serious. And then everything shifted. Before Ashley could continue, Jennifer Lee stepped onto the stage, holding a microphone in one hand and a remote in the other. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, her voice clear and composed. "Before the surprise continues, the bride would like to share something important with you all." Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. Edward's smile faltered. Linda stiffened. Ashley's brows knitted, but she quickly recovered her grin. Martha stepped forward, microphone in hand. Thank you all for being here. I know this is a day of joy and unity, but it should also be a day of truth. Thomas moved beside her and rested a calming hand on her back. Jennifer tapped the remote. Behind them, a large screen lit up. The first document appeared. The original will, signed and notarized. Gasps rose from the crowd. This, Martha said, is my grandmother Josephine's true last will. It leaves her estate, including her house and investments, to me. But this document was hidden, replaced by a forged version. Linda paled. Jennifer clicked again. Audio began to play. First came Edward's voice. We need to take every measure to ensure the inheritance doesn't reach her hands. Then Linda. I've perfectly imitated Josephine's signature. Finally Ashley. She'll be humiliated and Thomas will leave Martha. Silence gripped the room. The only sound was the soft clatter of a fork dropped to the floor. Martha turned to face her guests. I didn't want to believe it at first. But I had to protect the truth, and myself. This wedding was almost sabotaged by the very people meant to celebrate it. Ashley's smile had vanished, her mouth slightly open. Edward looked like stone. Linda quietly reached for a chair. I know this is hard to hear, Martha continued. But I won't carry their shame any longer. Today isn't just about a wedding. It's about claiming my voice, my dignity, and the future my grandmother wanted for me. Thomas stepped forward and raised his glass. To truth, to strength, and to a bride who wouldn't let herself be broken. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling into a thunderous wave. Some guests turned to glare at Edward and Linda. Others stood in support of Martha. Ashley stormed from the hall, her heels clacking loudly against the floor. Linda followed, head lowered. Edward lingered a moment longer, eyes narrowing at Martha, then turned and left without a word. Martha stood still for a moment, breathing deeply. Then she turned to the cake, smiled at Thomas, and together they cut the first slice. Cheers erupted again. The music returned. But something in the air had changed. Martha had not only gotten married, she had finally freed herself. So you would never doubt what was real and what was deception. I've hidden everything where they could not reach it. You are stronger than they know. You are not alone. Find your truth, live with courage, and know that my love is with you always. With all my heart. Grandmother Josephine. Martha folded the letter slowly. The hall was so quiet, one could hear the soft rustle of paper as she slid it back into the envelope. I have chosen peace over pretense, she said softly, her voice carrying weight. And today I choose love, real love, not the love that comes with conditions, power, or manipulation. Thomas stepped beside her. And you're not alone anymore. The guests erupted into applause, this time not out of confusion or politeness, but out of admiration. Many stood. Some wiped away tears. Even Thomas's stoic father gave a rare nod of approval. Meanwhile, Edward, Linda, and Ashley stood cornered in their own silence. The room no longer shielded them. Security staff, previously unnoticed at the edges of the hall, moved toward the trio. Jennifer, with a subtle hand signal, confirmed the legal team was on standby outside. The forged documents, the original will, and hours of surveillance footage had already been submitted to the authorities. As the three were quietly escorted away for questioning, the band picked up a new tune, a gentle, hopeful melody. Martha turned back to the crowd. Now, if you'll excuse me, she said with a soft smile, I'd like to dance with my husband. In this dress, icing and all. Laughter rippled through the hall. Someone called out, to the bravest bride in Boston. And as Martha and Thomas began their first dance, surrounded by real friends and found family, the air changed. Not just celebration but something deeper. A reclaiming, rising, beginning. Martha unfolded the letter and read aloud. I hope this letter, and all the truth it holds, finds its way to you. My dearest granddaughter, you are my greatest pride. Discover for yourself what family truly means, through your own strength. With all my love, Grandma. She looked up to find Edward and Linda frozen in their chairs, while Ashley's face flushed with fury. Lies! Ashley burst out. Those videos were doctored. Grandma would never say such things. Martha set the letter aside and calmly produced more papers. Video can be faked and voices forged. But what of a notarized will and expert verification of her signature? She tapped the stack of documents. These are legally binding. They've already been filed, and proceedings start tomorrow. Edward rose pallid. Martha, this isn't the place for family matters. Family? Martha's tone was ice. When have you ever treated me as one? Supported me at any milestone? Linda stood up, eyes glistening. Sweetheart, you've always been enough. Martha cut her off. I'm done with your lies. Thomas took her hand and stood beside her. His own parents rose in solidarity. Today I choose a new family, Martha declared, voice steady. True love is about giving, not taking. It's about respect and support. Slowly, Thomas's relatives and her closest friends rose to surround the couple. Doris Hudson emerged from the back, placing a gentle hand on Martha's shoulder. Your grandmother would be so proud, she said softly. Edward, Linda, and Ashley found themselves isolated. As the circle around them dissolved, they tried to slip away. Wait, Martha called, halting them. The hall fell silent again. She approached them, cake-stained dress and all. I don't want to end today with bitterness, she said, her voice softening. Now that the truth is known, what happens next is your choice. Edward met her gaze, his voice cracking. Let's pause here for today, Martha said quietly. We can discuss the rest with our lawyers tomorrow. Ashley stormed out, shaking with rage. Linda clung to Edward's arm as they followed in silent shame. A collective exhale swept the room. Martha turned to Thomas. I'm sorry our wedding became this. He cupped her face, smiling gently. You were incredible. And hey, this dress can be worn twice today. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. Martha laughed, genuine for the first time. She signaled the DJ, and the music swelled once more. Thomas's father stepped forward, glass raised. To truth and courage. Let's celebrate this wonderful couple. Surrounded by warmth and congratulations, Martha slipped away with Jennifer and the bridesmaids to change into her spare gown. They hugged and laughed through tears. You were amazing, Jennifer said, brushing stray crumbs of cake from Martha's hair. Martha looked at her reflection in the mirror. The ivory dress was simple, elegant, and suited the woman she had become. She took a deep breath. Let's begin the real celebration. Back in the hall, Thomas awaited her. Together they cut a fresh slice of cake, this time free of sabotage, and the room erupted in genuine joy. Epilogue. A week later, Martha and Thomas honeymooned on Santorini's sunlit cliffs. Overlooking the Aegean, Martha snapped a selfie. What's that for? Thomas asked, draping an arm around her. She grinned at her phone. True family isn't defined by blood, but by love and respect. He kissed her temple. Perfect. Upon their return, Martha found a letter from her parents. Edward and Linda admitted their long-standing favoritism had been wrong, expressed deep remorse, and asked if she'd ever let them back in her life. There was no word from Ashley, who'd instead painted herself as a victim online, only to be met with widespread skepticism. 6 months later, Martha agreed to meet her parents in a cafe. They confessed they'd returned her inheritance and were attending weekly therapy. It's a start, Martha said, gently taking her mother's hand. The road will be long, but I want to try. A year on, trust was rebuilding. Ashley, meanwhile, had moved to Michigan, quietly working through her own reckoning. In Martha and Thomas's living room, 2 wedding photos hung side by side, one of Martha with her face smeared in cake, the other of her radiant in the second dress. They symbolized her journey from betrayal to triumph. 6 months pregnant, she rested a hand on her belly and turned to Thomas. Our baby will grow up in a real family, she said. He placed his hand over hers. And we'll teach her exactly what that means. As dusk settled over Boston, Martha called Doris. Grandma would be so proud, Doris said. Martha let out a contented sigh. Her life had taken unexpected turns, but surrounded by genuine love, she'd never felt more at home.